All right, we are back for another midweek segment here on the Big Orange Podcast. I'm Charlie Burris. That is Zach Reagan, as always, and we are joined this time around by draft analyst at Pro Football Focus, Trevor Sikkema. Forgive him. He's a Florida fan, but we'll give him a pass. What's up, Trevor?
Y'all had a way better season than we did. So it's not even like a thing. Like Florida's losing the best player that they have in Anthony Richardson. And I don't even know what next year's going to be. So I think y'all are doing okay. I feel like your followers aren't going to hate me too much. We might for this exact podcast, but
yeah, we might have to talk about that at some point in this. While we got we don't admittedly we full fans on here too often. Surprising that might be. But Trevor, you were at the Senior Bowl, I believe.
I was indeed.
So you got to see on Tennessee's side some players that were there. Your initial view of, I guess, the players that played: Darnell Wright, Byron Young, and then Hendon Hooker was there. Just talking to folks. Did anybody stand out to you? What'd you think of Tennessee's guys at the Senior Bowl?
No, Wright's awesome. Wright's been actually, all three of these guys are kind of like my guys, if you will. I feel like I'm higher on Byron Young than a lot of other people are. But I mean, I'll start with Darnell Wright. I think Darnell Wright's absolutely a first round pick. Like, I think he's somebody who should be picked in that kind of a value. You look at, I think some people look at the fact that he played right tackle and they go, oh, well, he's just a right tackle. Well, who do you think the best pass rushers are going up against? Like, they're going up against right tackles. It's not just about the blindside protection, because I think that's a little bit overblown in today's NFL. Not that it's not important, but I just think that you have to have two really good offensive tackles. So we shouldn't devalue how good Darnell Wright is just because he plays on the right side of the line of scrimmage. That's absolutely valuable. And what he was able to do down in Mobile was a extension of what we saw on tape from him. He went through the ringer, man, this past year. I feel like he went up against some really damn good pass rushers, whether they were draft eligible guys or not. And I just love his mentality. Like, I love how, I said this so many times over Senior Bowl week, he brings the fight to pass rushers. Like, a lot of times you'll watch guys in their pass sets and, they will be waiting to see what kind of a pass rush move somebody's going to give on him. And whenever the hands come up from the pass rusher or whatever move is up first, then they will adjust. They'll kind of readjust. They'll get their hands in the right place. They'll try to counter it. Darnell Wright, there were a couple of specific reps where he had a guy coming at him, and before the edge rusher could even get their hands on him, he was punching them in the chest. And then all of a sudden he was knocking him back, and they were like, whoa, hold on, that's not supposed to happen. Next thing you know, Darnell Wright's got his hands inside the pads, and then the rep is over. He wins the rep. So I thought he had a really great week. The only edge rusher that really gave Wright consistent issues was Will McDonald from Iowa State. And that was simply because Will wins with speed really well. Like, he's somebody who can consistently attack the outside shoulder with a good first step. He knows how to time his counter with going to the inside. And it just seemed as though that speed got Wright in trouble because of that over-aggressive nature that he kind of has. And McDonald was able to react very quickly to that and get the better of him a couple of times. But overall, I thought that Wright did fantastic. I think he solidified first-round status. And then when it comes to Byron Young, I like Byron Young a lot, man, especially when you understand the background that he's coming from, right? Hasn't even played football that long. And you look at what he's been able to do over the last 2 years at Tennessee. Okay, maybe he didn't light the world on fire, but you just watch those certain instances. He's got the bend. He's got the explosiveness. He's got that density to him. I think the size is perfect. It's exactly what you want as a stand-up edge rusher and a guy who could win with his hand in the dirt. So those two guys specifically, the ones that were able to be out there on the practice field, are kind of two of my guys in this class. So I was glad that I got to watch them up close.
Somebody from ESPN last week, I don't know if it was Jeremy Fowler or somebody I think that was at the Senior Bowl, mentioned that the Steelers have been kind of keeping a close tabs on Darnell Wright and might like him at guard. Do you think that's a possibility for him? Would he move inside, or do you think he sticks at tackle?
Well, I mean, that all kind of just depends how open he would be to it. I know the Steelers, specifically Mike Tomlin, was watching a lot of offensive line play. I mean, they could definitely use an upgrade along the offensive line. Dan Moore Jr. on the left side, it wasn't really great for them this past year. Chuck Okorafor on the right side was good. And people might say, like, oh, they've already got their right side of the line of scrimmage figured out. But he played left tackle in college, so I think swinging him over to left tackle if they wanted to do that, if they drafted a guy like Darnell Wright, I think that could be well within their realm of possibility. Certainly the mentality that Wright plays with can also lend itself to be successful on the inside, right? When you think about a lot of those interior players, you got to be tough, you got to be aggressive, you got to be a people mover, right? And that's exactly what Darnell Wright is. I feel like he brings a little bit more strength, a little bit more of a power profile to playing offensive tackle anyways. So at that point, it would just come down to him, like whether or not he would be willing to play on the inside, because some guys aren't. Like some guys are like, no, I exclusively want to play a tackle for as much saying power as a rookie might have, and so I'm not exactly sure what that situation is going to be, but for the way Darnell Wright plays, I could see him having success on the inside for sure.
For a player as beloved as Hendon Hooker was, obviously his season ended really tragically. I mean, that's the best word I can think to use for it. But it seems like he has made a real concerted effort to just get his face out there. I mean, basically, as we're doing this, he's on the Pat McAfee show and just like really kind of getting his brand out there, even though he's not able to show his skills at these sort of exhibitions.
Mm-hmm.
When you see a kid doing that, I'm trying to think of what the right question would be. How much does that injury hurt his draft chances? And does him going out and trying to be public like that help?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it that it helps. The issue with Hendon is he was already an older prospect. Now you're probably missing the first year of his rookie contract. You're not going to draft a guy like that in the first round, so you're not going to get the fifth-year option. So essentially, you're going to get a 26-year-old with no NFL experience, a year off of the game, and you only have 3 years left on the rookie deal. That's not to say that it still can't really work out for him. It can. It's just that in a game that is the NFL draft where nothing is guaranteed, teams like stacking things in their favor to potentially hit on a draft prospect. That's why they like drafting underclassmen, younger guys who are 20 years old, 21 years old, because by the time that they hit their second contract, they'll still only be in their mid-20s and they'll have 4 years of NFL experience, but also because if you get a guy who you think can really play well for you at an early age, you know that there's so much more that they can learn, so much more that they could do. The ceiling is higher. So for Hendon, I think that him going to the Senior Bowl was huge, even though he couldn't play, because you kind of let the tape speak for itself. He was on his way to being a Heisman Trophy finalist before he got hurt, the way that he was playing. So you don't really have an issue standing on the tape that he put out there last year. What you want to do is try to stack the deck in your favor, being really great in interviews, shaking as many hands as you can, being personable with these coaches. And that's what he was from all accounts. I'm not in the meeting room with these teams, but all of the reports that I heard out of what Hendon Hooker's week was like was that he definitely helped himself a lot, that a lot of teams really loved him. And so anytime that's the case, maybe you start fighting back on the, okay, well, he's going to miss 1 year of his rookie deal. He's going to be 25 years old, but we love the kid, right? If you can throw that in there at the end, then at the end of the day, whether it's the owner, the GM, the head coach, whoever's really pulling the trigger on a draft pick, that can be all the difference in the world. If you believe in a player and believe that whenever he gets back out there on the field, no matter how old he is, he can achieve that kind of ceiling, that gets you drafted. And so it feels like, from the hype that we've got out of the Senior Bowl, he's going to be a day 2 pick. I don't know where it's going to happen, but it feels like he really can be a day 2 pick after what I heard.
There's been there's been so much talk about him in the interview process and his character and just the way he's carried himself, like in the Senior Bowl and now, like you said, doing these other interviews. What about the on-field product? I know you mentioned his tape a little bit, but how does that translate to the NFL? I know there's a lot of questions about the system that he played in at Tennessee, how much that benefited him. How do you think his playing style translates to the NFL?
Yeah, so obviously Heupel's a great offensive mind, and he makes things very, very easy, right? He streamlines. I think the most important part to recognize about his offense is that he streamlines every position and every job to be very simplified. Like there's not a ton of thinking that is involved. And I'm not even saying that as a knock on Hooker, because I'm about to compliment him in that similar way, but when things are that simplified and you get a lot of guys who just understand their role really well, that's when you can see potency on the offense. Now, for the quarterback specifically, what impressed me the most about Hendon Hooker is that it felt like he was a master of that offense. The confidence that he had throughout the year was fantastic. And I think you got a really good look at how well he was able to play because of how well he knew that offense. Does he have the greatest arm in this draft class? No. He's got a little bit of mobility to him. Obviously, the injury certainly helps that, or hurts that part of his scouting report, but like, I think he's got a good arm, and I love the fact that he just knew where the ball was supposed to go all the time. He wasn't afraid to throw it deep. He could throw it over the middle. He took chances at the sideline with different amounts of his guys. Obviously, he was the screenplays and the slants, like the quick game, he was very in rhythm with those things as well. The ball placement was fantastic. You could tell that he put a lot of work in when it came to those reps. And so the thing that really impressed me the most was what this guy looks like and the confidence that he exudes in an offense that he really knows really well. And perhaps that's going to be the best selling point for him anyways, if you figure he's going to miss all of next year. Because look, even if you think, okay, he might be getting out on the practice field, you're probably not throwing him out there in, November, December of NFL football. So he's probably sitting all of next year, no matter what anyways. But that might be a great selling point for him because you go, okay, we get this guy in, we give him the playbook, we let him master the playbook, and then maybe year 2, he does get to step on that field and look like that confident player that we were able to see at Tennessee. Because going back to the age, going back to not having that extra 5th year on the contract, that timetable also goes into it. Because if you're missing a year, then you don't want to have to tell yourself, all right, well, second year of the contract, first year as a starter, it's a warm-up year. It's basically, you can throw it out. He's just learning all year long, because then you go, all right, he's 27 years old. He's only got 2 years left on the deal. Is he going to be able to become that player? But I do specifically think that what we saw from Hendon this past season gives evidence to believe that you can get a really great quarterback out of him within the 2-year window of when you could expect him to be healthy and be out on the field in the NFL.
Let's talk about Hendon's best dude out there for Tennessee this season, Jalin Hyatt. He wasn't at Senior Bowl, but obviously his resume is pretty nice after winning the Blitnikoff Award this year. Your thoughts on Jalin Hyatt, first-round pick? Is he that good, or do you see him a little differently?
It kind of depends what he runs at the combine. I think everybody already knows he's really fast. But I do think there is still something to that hype and momentum that you get when you step up there and you run close to a 4.3 flat, right? Like, you run something in the 4.3s. I think that has the chance to remind people of what you could be. Now, obviously, he is a vertical threat wide receiver. That's how he was able to rack up so many yards this past season. And he was the best in college football doing it, right? The Blitnikoff winner for a reason. I think his route tree is a little limited, right? He's a guy who is just... Clearly, he's in the back of a stacked alignment. You really can't get hands on him in the line. You let him get in a couple of steps into his acceleration on a vertical route, and there's not a lot of corners that could keep up with him, right? I go back to that South Carolina game, and I was actually scouting Cam Smith, the corner from South Carolina. And I'm laughing watching the game. And this is nothing against Cam Smith, but Cam Smith's lined up in the slot against Jalin Hyatt, and he's starting like 18 yards back from where the line of scrimmage is, because Jalin Hyatt's so fast and because he's got to give him that room as a speed demon. The thing that he has going for him in this specific draft class is that even though his route tree is limited and he's kind of just a vertical threat player, there's not really anybody else in this class of that mold. And you look at teams like the Baltimore Ravens, Los Angeles Chargers, like even the New York Giants, maybe the Dallas Cowboys, back into the first round, they all need that vertical take the top off the defense player. And so where I tell you, when I look at Jalin Hyatt's scouting report, I go, okay, well, it's a little limited in what you would want from a first round pick wide receiver if you really think that kind of a player unlocks your offense. If you got the other guys, the Chargers are a perfect example. They have Keenan Allen underneath. They've got Mike Williams to the sideline as a big-time possession wide receiver. What they don't have is that player to take the top off and really be able to get the most out of Justin Herbert's arm to really attack downfield. Hyatt could potentially be that guy. I don't, as we are recording this right now, I would tell you that Hyatt's not going to be a first round pick. I think he's going to be a second round pick just because it feels like the league is okay with waiting on wide receivers. But the scarcity of his mold and the kind of player that he is could lend itself to him sneaking into the back end of the first round because of that.
What about Cedric Tillman? I feel like everybody's forgetting about him, and because of this season with the ankle injury, he didn't really get to play like he did in 2021. But I don't do what you do, obviously, but when I watch him, I feel like his body control sticks out. Like the way he's able to adjust to some of these hard catches feels like that translates to the NFL. How do you see, his draft status? How bad did last year hurt him? Because it felt like he might have been close to a first round pick coming out of that 2021 season.
Yeah, body control is the thing. I mean, I just think he's such a well-rounded player. I do think the injury hurts him a decent amount. I haven't even watched a ton of him just because I don't know how much the hype is there for him. He kind of gets lost because of this past year, but from what I was able to see on film from him, I liked him as an overall wide receiver. It's just, does he have any kind of like trump card that's going to allow him to differentiate himself from different wide receivers in this class? We're actually doing our final evaluation on wide receivers, and what we try to do is, at least me personally, like I like to watch guys live during the season, and I was able to watch a little bit of Tillman, of course, and I kind of knew a little bit about him, but I will have a better answer on what I could see from Tillman after we do our final studies here in a couple of weeks with the combine coming up, because I think it's going to be important too, right? No matter what. So I have really liked what I've seen for him so far. I just don't know. I don't know if he's able to boast that kind of like trump card as a wide receiver to stand out amongst a wide receiver group that feels like it's going to be pretty deep on day two. Just
a quick like behind the scenes question, is because I'm curious, like how many hours do you put in for like each prospect, or how much film do you watch? Because that's a ton of work, it seems like.
So I like to, when we get into early rankings, and we'll start early rankings kind of like right after rivalry week, like once we get into, SEC, ACC, Big 12 championships, like beginning in December, we'll start to go through a lot of these prospects because most of the tape is obviously done. You don't really need to worry too much about the bowl game tape. And I will make it a point to watch at least 3 full games of a player for, and that's all 22 footage. So not just broadcast footage, but all 22 footage for a player when I write up their initial scouting report. Then when I do like final evals, I will at least watch 5 games. So if I wasn't able to get to 3 before, then I'll watch like the final 3, or if I was, then I'll watch at least 2 more of them. So I will get at least 5 games on a prospect when I put out a final eval on him. And that's kind of over the, whatever it is, 5 months between December and the end of April before I finally get to that. So that's normally my process. A lot of guys. Now, that's not to say I'll only watch 5 games, right? There are a couple of prospects that I did early rankings on that I watched 5 games because I'm 3 games in and I'm like, I still don't know what to think of this guy. Like, how much do I really like him? And then you watch a little bit more. So some of these players that I end up watching a little bit more just because you really want to figure it out. You want to have a good opinion on them and a good feel for where they can win in the NFL. But that's just kind of a peek behind the curtain of how I do it.
Yeah, clearly, you know what you're talking about. That is I don't know that I guess that is probably what the workload should be if you're going to know what these guys are actually about. But that's still... I try because every game's so different too, right? I mean, there are so many different teams that may play a certain set, like a style of defensive front, and if you're watching an offensive tackle, it's like, okay, well, he really didn't go up against anybody who was on his outside shoulder all game. It might be maybe a team that really prioritizes their defensive ends to play over the inside shoulder. And so really it's like, okay, well, this guy's weakness is on the outside shoulder. Oh, well, I really liked his Baylor tape. Of course you really liked his Baylor tape because nobody attacked him on the outside shoulder, like, right? And so those are the things that you have to notice, like, and that's the reason why you watch multiple games is not only do you give these players an opportunity to showcase the best of themselves, or you be able to find like whatever the average is, whether the average for them is very high, whether the average for them is very low, but also just the way that teams match up against them. You're watching a wide receiver. Some teams will play everything in press. Other teams will play everything in off. Some teams are cover 3 based. Some teams are quarters based. Like, it's just, you never really know. And so that's another reason why I think that you've at least got to watch 4 or 5 games of a player, because you want to see them go up against a certain style of defense or offense
at least twice, hopefully more than that as you kind of dig into a lot more.
Well, let's finish with this because you and me are both time crunched actually. But as I mentioned at the beginning, you are a Florida fan.
Mm-hmm.
There are really two objectives as a Tennessee football coach. One, beat Alabama. Heupel knocked that out this year, and you obviously want to keep that consistent, but that's a pretty tall bar to hit. I think one that's reachable in this moment, it seems, is not only beating Florida, he did that, but beating Florida into the future also, and essentially at right now becoming that number 2 team in the SEC East. As a Florida fan, do you fear that this might finally be the time where Tennessee snatches the chain back from Florida?
I will say that one, I love this rivalry. It's so much fun. I mean, it is so heated, and it has been so back and forth. And I do think that Tennessee is in a really great spot. I love Billy Napier too. I think that Billy Napier's got Florida's program going in the right direction. I really wish, selfishly, of course, that Anthony Richardson would have stayed another year, because I feel like he could have really had a phenomenal season. Maybe could have even been on a Heisman track, depending on his supporting cast and if those guys were going to take the next step. But as much as I like where the team is going with Billy Napier, Josh Heupel understands where college football is. Score points. And that is his whole thing. So are there going to be years when Tennessee football might be frustrating? Yes. But there are also going to be years when they're beating teams that are maybe well above where their overall talent is, because he understands how to put points on the board. And to me, I think that offense, that structure, and that mindset is always going to have Tennessee right there. As long as they have a quarterback that can operate that, they're going to get those kinds of skilled players in recruiting, because you're going to be able to sell it. Look, they're going to use Jalin Hyatt as a blueprint so often in recruiting. Look at what happens when you come and play wide receiver in our system. You have unbelievable numbers. You get the hardware. The team's going to be top 10. You can sell all of that. And I think offense, we're in the offensive age of college football. I just don't think that there's any doubt about it. And to have Heupel as a head coach in 2023, I think is great. And I think that it's going to produce a lot of really good season for Tennessee.
Real quick before we go, since you're a Florida guy, how do you feel about Anthony Richardson in the draft? I'm a Carolina Panthers fan, and I've seen him mocked to them a lot. And I didn't watch a lot of him this year, but obviously watched the Tennessee game. I mean, he looked like a first-round pick against Tennessee in that game. Right. So how do you feel about him in the draft?
Yeah, the ceiling, the highs, absolutely there as a top 15 pick, as a first-round pick. Now, the consistency is not quite there yet, but there are a lot of things that he does really well. He just doesn't do it as often as you would like. I go back to the conversation that a lot of people had with Malik Willis last year, where people say, okay, Anthony Richardson, dual threat quarterback, big arm, somebody who can extend plays, but the accuracy isn't there the way that you want it to, and the consistency is just not there the way that you want it to. Malik Willis got picked in the 3rd round. Why are we talking about Anthony Richardson as a first-round pick? And I think the difference is that with Malik, you needed to use your imagination. It was, okay, if he fixes the footwork, if the throwing motion gets better, if the ball placement is better, if the decision-making is better, how he reads the field, if. And you had to use a lot of imagination to talk about what he could be for him to achieve his ceiling. With Anthony Richardson, it's not an if. You mentioned the Tennessee game. That's one of a couple of games where he put it out there. He did it. He was unbelievable. He was able to showcase that high-end talent. He just doesn't do it as consistently. So it's less of imagination and it's more of repetition. That's what it's going to take for Anthony Richardson. And look, I think he had people in his ear talking to him when he was thinking about declaring for the draft. And I don't think he declares if people don't tell him, yeah, you're going to be a first-round pick. It's going to happen. I think he would have went back to school if that wasn't the case. So it's a really intriguing quarterback class with him, Will Levis, C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young. I've done mock drafts before where I've had all 4 quarterbacks go in the top 10, top 9, with Carolina sitting there at 9. And I've been like, yeah, this makes sense. But it could be stretched out a little bit further. Maybe those 4 quarterbacks go top 20 instead of top 10. But I do think that that's how the 2023 NFL draft is going to be narrated, if you will, through that quarterback class.
I'd want to ask you about the Titans, but I don't even want to talk about them right now, as I sadly wear my Titans shirt. All right. I think that is it. Pro Football Focus. That sounds weird. I was going to say Pro Football Focuses.
Focus eye. Focus
Focus
E.
eye.
Oh, yeah.
Trevor Sigma of Pro Football Focus. Thanks so much for coming on, man. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Anytime.
Yep. Well, I'll throw this on at the end. That should have been the end right there. But I will say, don't forget to watch us Mondays, 4 p.m. because these get more views than our normal show a lot of the time. So 4 p.m. Eastern time, watch the live stream. Zach and I will be there to talk Vols every week on Mondays. Tune in there, and we will talk to y'all next week.